So what Tabari does is, in his work, he talks about the rise of Islam and about of Islamic history. He gives a year-wise expansion of the Islamic empire. Initially, in the year 12 letter, the record is of the Al-Basra and about Farj Hind. Here he introduces the term as Ardh Al-Hind. Please go and capture Ardh Al-Hind. So effectively, all these evidences point to a fight between these Abbasid caliphs, Caliph al-Mamun, Imam Ghassan bin Abdullah, who is considered the greatest ruler of Oman, and obviously Pratihara Nagabhatta. So what does this actually, all these inscriptions and epigraphs shall present to you in a moment, talk about? So they basically talk about that there was an attack from the province of Sindh by the Arabs to places in the interior of Bharat. In order to counteract it, the Pratiharas launched a naval expedition to cut what is called as supply lines.
So I would like to request now Venkatesh Rangan ji to present his presentation.
I would like to know your views on this statement. Throughout our history, or even if you take the past 1,300 years, invaders have attacked Bharat repeatedly. You had Muhammad bin Qasim, Muhammad Ghazni, Babar, etc., Alauddin Khilji, whatever. Invaders attacked Bharat repeatedly, but kings of Bharat, Hindu kings, never thought of attacking those invaders' country. So Hindu kings never said, like, let's attack Baghdad, let's attack Samarkand. We are always defensive people. We are brave people, we are defensive people. How many of you think this is, or how many of you resonate with it? Even I used to believe in this. Yeah. And honestly, this is a very common thought, right? There are different interpretations. Some people, the people who hate Bharat will say that we are very weak people. People who love Bharat will say we are very peaceful people. But I would say the common point between rightists, leftists, dharmic, adharmic, nationalists, anti-national is people believe that we never attacked that invader's country, right? So before 2016, when 26/11 happened, when Mumbai was attacked by terrorists, people said India showed strategic restraint and maturity. A lot of the American analysts are saying, we didn't attack Pakistan. So it's a great peaceful country. We didn't attack Pakistan. Whatever we did, right? Second statement. China and Bharat were friends till the 20th century. Till 1962, there's no record of a conflict in mainland China. So the China which we know today never existed in history, right? I'll come to that in a bit. But mainland China, where you have Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, that had no military action of any Bharatiya or Hindu ruler, right? That's generally what is taught, right? So we are all accepting now that Cholas conquered Southeast Asia, because Southeast Asia was also Hindu, Cholas were also Hindu, Southeast Asia not geopolitically significant. So fine, people say Lalita attacked Tibet. Kya hota hai? Dalai Lama bechara is a refugee. But did we attack China and have conquest in mainland China? Did we attack Arabia, Baghdad, Iraq? Generally we feel no, right? So today I want to break this myth. I honestly felt the same thing when I was actually approached by somebody from the Indian Navy, an extremely senior officer in the Indian Navy. I wouldn't like to take the name. But he told me that whenever we in the Navy go and do exercises with other countries, right? We have quad grouping, we do with Americans, we do Australians. They told me these guys come and they have no history themselves, but they'll talk about maritime, I would say philosophy, historic maritime philosophy of Australian Navy. The Chinese have one guy called Zheng He. He was some guy who kind of went in 14th century. They have made a whole set of exhibitions. The Chinese government has sponsored across the world how the Chinese went to Africa. They took tribute from Africa. So he said, why don't we have something like that? So that is what spurred my interest. And what I found is there is overwhelming evidence in Arabic, Persian, Chinese, and on very own Bharatiya sources which talk of our active military operations and conquests in all these countries, right? So what I'll do today is, in my book I have talked about 21 such expeditions. This was 2 years ago. I have found many more in the past 2 years, but since we have paucity of time, I'll stick to 4 expeditions in this presentation today, where I'll go through each and every source, bit by bit, year by year, so we actually understand the depth of the facts we have in these basically different sources, right? So first I'll talk with our own Imadi Pulakeshi, Satyashreya Parmeshwara Pulakeshi, Chalukya Pulakeshi II. His naval strikes in Iraq. Okay, all these are post-Islamic. So I'm talking after the Islamic Caliphate has come in. Next, I'll talk about Pratihara naval raids on Basra, Zulfar, Dibba and Fars. Then Parmara conquest against the Ghaznavids, right? So why are all these significant? Like we believe Muhammad Ghazni attacked Somnath, right? Muhammad Ghazni's descendants attacked Bharat many times. Did any Hindu ruler think of attacking Central Asia, Turkestan, Turkey? So very important expedition. And finally, Chinese texts, which themselves talk about the iron, what they call the iron-wheeled monarchs in the Chinese concept. They give a list of different kings and emperors, and there are several kings from Bharat in that iron-wheeled monarchs who ruled China, and the very term iron-wheeled means somebody who ruled with a sword. So I'll come to these in a bit. I'll start with the first one. Okay. I think everybody here knows about Ardh Pulakeshi, right? I mean, he's a hero. You would say, one of the most powerful emperors of our Bharatiya history, right? But very few people know about his expedition in the Al-Faw Peninsula, Iraq. Firstly, what is this Al-Faw Peninsula? What is Iraq? So all of you know this is a map of the Middle East, right? So you have Iraq out there. If you see the Persian Gulf, this stretch of water is called the Persian Gulf. And over here you have Kuwait. And this part, right, which is on the head of the Persian Gulf, is called Al-Faw Peninsula. Very important for oil. Iraq is, I think, one of the second or third largest producers of oil, right? Much of the refineries are present in Al-Faw. That is why historically, Al-Faw has always been the site of bloody battles. Till today, till the 21st century, right? So, if I look at the modern times, Iraq-Iran war, the bloodiest battles in Iraq-Iran war were on the Al-Faw Peninsula. In fact, the use of chemical weapons, which was one of the features of the Iraq-Iran war, alleged in the Al-Faw Peninsula. When the Iraqi forces recaptured Al-Faw, Saddam Hussein declared a national holiday. That was the extent of the victory. When the Americans invaded Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein, the bloodiest battle in which two crack special forces units, the American Marine Commandos and the UK Special Forces, actually operated was in the Al-Faw Peninsula. Again, oil, refineries, and as you can see that map, which you can also see out here, it is the only outlet to the sea for this entire Middle Eastern region, right? So if the entire fertile belt, which you call the Tigris-Euphrates belt, where the main agricultural produce and is grown, the main outlet to the sea is actually from the Al-Faw Peninsula, right? So now why are we talking about this Al-Faw Peninsula and why are we talking about Iraq? Because of this, let's introduce ourselves to this one Arabic Islamic theologian called Abu Jafar Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, right? He was there from 839 to 923 CE. He's a renowned polymath in Islamic circles. So a guy who wrote a tasfir. He interpreted the Quran. Okay. He also wrote a historical work called Tariq al-Rasul wa al-Muluk. Now, if you ever track the I would say the Islamic clerics, etc., they call his works ijtihad, very credible, very objective. Now, this person never visited Bharat, right? He was in North Africa. He was in Baghdad. He settled down in Baghdad during the time of the Abbasid Caliphate, which was which is the most powerful, I would say, empire of Islamic history. In fact, this person had a lot of prejudice against Hindus. He openly expresses it. He calls them, he says these are kufr, they do kufr, they are kind of, whatever. But why am I suggesting all this? That it's very important we understand the personality of a guy who is actually giving us lot of communication between the first caliphs and his commanders, and also giving his own interpretations, and also naming the king, but because of which we can connect it to Chalukya Pulakeshi. So what Tabari does is, in his work, he talks about the rise of Islam and about of Islamic history. He gives a year-wise expansion of the Islamic empire. So all of you know that Islam arose in Saudi Arabia, which is in the late 6th, early 7th century. About year 11 of the Islamic calendar, the founder of Islam passed away. And after him, his father-in-law, Abu Bakr, became the Caliph. So he's considered to be the first Caliph. And there was a round of great expansion. And in fact, in a span of 20-30 years, they wiped out the entire Persian, Mesopotamian, North African civilization and reached up to Europe, Spain. They in fact captured Spain also. They reached up till China, that is in Xinjiang province, right till the east. So year by year, between year 12 and year 16, Tabari talks about a lot of military activity involving a certain king of Al-Hind or a certain king of India. So let's see exactly what happened. So if we start from the 12th year of the Islamic calendar, we have Caliph Abu Bakr, who writes to his commander called Khalid bin Walid. Now this Khalid bin Walid is an undefeated commander of the Arabs. Basically, he has fought 100 battles and been undefeated, right? So Caliph Abu Bakr says that we have to spread Islam, we have to spread authority. So we have to attack Iraq, Iran, and obviously, capture these areas, right? So the first area we should capture is the Al-Faw Peninsula. Now in year 12, he first writes a letter saying that you begin with Ardh Al-Hind, which is Al-Ubula. Okay, so if you look at this Al-Faw Peninsula, about 100 kilometers from the Persian Gulf, there's a place called Al-Ubula, right? Now, this Caliph refers it to as a gateway to India or gateway to Hind, Ardh Hind, right? And he tells him, you begin with that. That's the most critical strategic part. Once you capture that, we can destroy the entire Persian Empire, right? So Khalid bin Walid in year 12, which corresponds to 633 CE, goes and sets up camp in that particular Al-Faw Peninsula. You can see the green triangles. There's a waterway called the Shatt al-Arab. So Khalid bin Walid goes and sets up camp out there, right? His objective is to wipe out all resistance, conquer this territory, and then go into Iraq, Iran, and conquer that area, right? For some reason, however, he's not able to do that. So we have a second communication which says the gateway of India, okay, was the most important and strongly guarded, and the commander had to fight the Bedouins on land and Bahariya al-Hind, or the navy of Hind on the sea. So in year 12, this particular area was under attack on two fronts, by the Arabs from the land and by a Bharatiya navy on the sea. Now there are different translations to it. Bahariya al-Hind, because Bahariya is actually a sea in, Bahar is a sea in Arabic. So it could actually be that the Hindis were attacking from the sea, or R.C. Majumdar translates it as a navy, because it's the ocean of the Hind. So year 12, the situation is Khalid bin Walid is setting up camp in Al-Faw, but this garrison is being attacked by a unknown kind of navy from Al-Hind. Now, which is this navy from Al-Hind? Why are they attacking Al-Faw? What is the reason? Let's dwell a little more deeper. We go to the next year. In year 13 of the Islamic calendar, there is no record, right? So, remember in year 12, Khalid bin Walid is given the task of conquering, capturing, and wiping out this area. In year 14, the next Caliph, who is Caliph Umar, recounts that the previous attempt was unsuccessful. So nothing happened. For some reason, these guys retreated. Whoever was the Arabs of Khalid bin Walid, they kind of retreated, right? So now Caliph Umar ibn Khattab talks to a very senior Islamic commander called Utbah ibn Ghazwan al-Masini. Now Utbah is one of the guys who's a close companion of Muhammad, when Muhammad used to be alive. So obviously he has a very high rank among the different Arabs. So he is given a command of 2,000 Banu Tasif, one of the most fanatical, ferocious Arabic warriors, and told, this time you should go and be successful, capture this Al-Faw Peninsula. But a very interesting thing happens here. Initially, in the year 12 letter, the record is of the Al-Basra and about Ardh Hind. Here he introduces the term as Ardh Al-Hind. Please go and capture Ardh Al-Hind. So that there's no confusion, Tabari writes, at that point of time, Al-Basra, or this Al-Faw Peninsula, came to be called as Ardh Al-Hind. So between year 12 and year 14, we see that this Al-Faw Peninsula is now called Ardh Hind. Ardh Hind means land of Bharat, land of India, land of Hind. And Ardh Hind is the gateway to Hind. So both these things kind of survive, right? So year 14, we have Utbah who's going there. So Utbah ibn Ghazwan goes there to capture this area, and there's a great fight which happens. Now we go to next year, year 15. Okay. Now the Caliph, the Caliph Umar ibn Khattab decides that we need to have a Al-Amsar, or a garrison. Okay. So in this garrison, he writes that now a great battle has happened called the Battle of Kasadia, in which the Persians have been wiped out. So Iran is no longer in contention. So the Caliph writes that we are going to be under attack by the Shahenshah Al-Hind. The king or the emperor of Al-Hind is going to attack us along with the king of Oman. So for that, please build an Al-Amsar in the mouth of the Tigris or Euphrates, right? If you just go back earlier to the map. So he's saying out here, in that peninsula which stretches, build a garrison so that you can defend this area from this attack of the Shahenshah Al-Hind, the emperor of Hind. Go down. Okay? And the defeated Persians should not get help from these people, right? So that's what happens in the 15 Al-Hijrat. So I will first go through all the evidence and then I'll pin together the story which actually happened. So in 16 Al-Hijrat, we find another communication which says that the Arab force has to retreat about 15 kilometers inland from any water body, right? And at least 130 kilometers away from the shore. So earlier in last year or in the previous year, in year 15, the Arab garrisons were in the mouth of the Tigris Euphrates. Now they have going back 130 kilometers. So effectively what is happening is we have the same dynasty, one of the most powerful caliphs of the Islamic Empire, who could defeat Spain, who could defeat Africa, who could defeat Central Asia, right? But they are unable to capture a small peninsula and they have to ultimately retreat about 130 kilometers because of this military action of this one Shahenshah Al-Hind. So the question really arises, who is this great king of, let's say, Bharat, who could actually go 3,000 kilometers to our west, who could go to Iraq and actually force these people to retreat, right? Now, there are many other details in the 16 Al-Hijrat communication. For example, Utbah Ghazwan says that the initial Al-Amsar could not be situated in Al-Ubula also. So anyway, I won't get into details. So going next, now we find that in the same year, the Omanis are completely suppressed. And the Arabs attack Thana and Barwas or Broch, right? Both of which are under the Chalukyan territories. But these attacks are unsuccessful or they are repulsed. And finally, in 17 Al-Hijrat, the Al-Basra Al-Amsar is created 15 kilometers inland, right? Now, all these evidences, what is the meaning of all this? Now, and who is this king of Al-Hind who basically has had this daring and this bravery actually to go and attack the Arabs in Iraq, right? Now, in year 5 of the Islamic calendar, fortunately for us, the same author, Muhammad ibn Jarir Tabari, gives the name of the Shahenshah Al-Hind, right? And this name he gives as Furumisha. Now, this Furumisha is generally taken by historians who mean Premesha, Parameshwara, or Pulakesha. It can be either one, right? So, this king of Al-Hind we are looking for has to be somebody who is powerful enough to be called the emperor of the entire Al-Hind. B, who has a naval force which can reach Iraq. C, has complete control over the western coast, right? Because that's when the resources can be used to send. Has relations with the Sasanians and has a title of Parameshwara. So that is effectively whom we are looking for. And if you look at it, the one emperor who fits all these qualifications is none other than Immadi Pulakeshi, right? Satyashraya Parameshwara Pulakeshi. So that's effectively it. Now, when we have all this, do we have any evidence from the Bharatiya side? I feel that the Aihole inscription needs to be reassessed or reviewed based on the very pointed Arabic and Persian references which we have actually given in earlier. If you look at the Aihole inscription, there's one line which says, Apara Jaladhira Lakshmi Yasmin Purim. There is a Puri or a town or a city or a port in a Apara Jaladhira Lakshmi, which is called the Lakshmi of the Western Sea. The Western Sea basically, which is kind of a fortune of the Western Sea. Now, historians have generally interpreted this to seem that is some place in the western coast of Bharat. In fact, they say this is nothing but the Gharapuri or Elephanta Island, which was the capital of the Mauryas of Konkan. Now, there are significant, I would say, contradictions in this view. Firstly, no excavation in the Elephanta Island has proved there to be a secular or a capital settlement of the Mauryas of Konkan. B, nothing in the Elephanta Island shows that it was a port used for war. Elephanta Island has a temple. There's a temple devoted Lord Shiva, which is a cave temple to Shiva. The question really arises is why should Chalukya Pulakeshi actually attack a religious place? B, is there a need for him? Because Aihole Prashasti very clearly says that the Chalukyan navy surrounded this island and there were no less than there were 100 ships which were used by Chalukya Navy. If you look geographically at Elephanta Island, it cannot support such a sustained or large naval operation, right? So effectively, we are looking at a certain port in the Western Sea, in our Upper Samudra, which is Lakshmi, which had a lot of potential for trade, and which basically, I would say, involved a lot of naval operations. So my sense is that this actual verse of the Aihole Prashasti actually talks about this expedition. In fact, descendants of Chalukya Pulakeshi, Rajashriya Vinay Datta, in his time there's an inscription which says that the Parasikas actually paid Datta or tribute to the Chalukyas. So obviously there's some echo of all the what are written Arabic sources in the Chalukyan sources. So let me piece together what exactly happened, right? All these are sources, but let's come to the narrative, right? The narrative is as follows, right? Bharatiya traders had a huge trade network since ancient times. This is a well-known fact. Commercially, we had a huge trade network, right? Utbah ibn Ghazwan himself says that among the communities who traded in Al-Ubula included Al-Hind, Omanis, Persians, etc. So it is obvious that our traders went there, and they went there, they would have stayed there, they would have built some temples, they would have built some residences, etc. So there was a colony of Hindu merchants in Iraq. Now we have this proved by Tabari himself, who talks about specific Indian communities called Sabajiya and Jats. Right? Some of them are from Sindh, but some of them are also from Al-Hind. Right? So the Arabs used to distinguish them from the 8th century onwards. So the fact that there was a merchant community in this area, and that's also the reason why this area was called as a Farj-e-Hind, the gateway to Bharat, because the trade to India and the largest, I would say, trade flow which happened from Bharat on to Iraq used to happen from the Al-Ubula port. So when the Caliphate rose, it is obvious, given the expansion of the Caliphate, that they had a focus on this Al-Faw Peninsula. It disrupted and destroyed trade. And because of this trade, the Indian merchants needed some succor. They needed some protection. Who will protect them? There was a disturbed condition. The Persian Empire is falling. The Caliphate soldiers are rising. So you needed some protection of these merchants. Right? As the Aihole inscription itself says, right? Utsaha Prabhu Mantra Shakti Sahite Deva Dvijan Vatapi Nagaram Rakshite. So Utsaha, as per the Arthashastra, any great Chakravarti has Utsaha Shakti, Mantra Shakti and Prabhava Shakti. Utsaha, you need to have energy, proactive energy. You can't just be sitting back and saying, let the enemy attack, I will attack. Secondly, Mantra Shakti. This Utsaha has been to be form of a proper formal policy. You need to have an army, you need to have tactics, you need to decide on your on how to attack it from a long-term perspective. And Prabhava Shakti, Prabhava, you should show your influence, your strength, what they call to as power projection in military terms. You should be able to show your strength so much that your enemy is deterred. Right? So as per Aihole, our Satyashraya Parameshwar Chalukya had all these three parameters. He had Utsaha Shakti, he had Prabhu Shakti, he also for Deva and Vijan, for protection of Brahmanas, for protection of, let's say, our culture, for protection of Dharma. His Vatapi Nagaram was a safe place. And that is why a lot of these merchants actually came to Imadi Pulakeshi telling him, please protect us. And this is the reason for these operations which are basically launched at that point of time. We should be aware that at that point of time, Chalukya Pulakeshi had defeated Harshavardhana and Mahedravarman Pallava. So he qualifies to the title of Shahenshah Al-Hind. He was the most powerful ruler of Bharat at that point of time. Why do we not find references after year 17? This was a time of 640 when the Chalukya has gone to a protracted struggle with the Pallavas, with Narasimha Varma Pallava also coming in. So that perhaps explains, and Pulakeshin's own death, which happened, a few years later, perhaps explains why we don't find any reference after the Islamic year 16 or 17 for Chalukyan attack. So this is dealing with, let's say, Imadi Pulakeshin, who was truly, I would say, the most powerful, one of the most powerful of our Hindu rulers, and I would say a very unique ruler in this sense. About 200 years after Imadi Pulakeshin, there was another great naval expedition launched across the Middle East. Right? We again have three different inscriptions and literary sources on this, from Iraq, from Oman, and from our Bharat also. Right? So I'll quickly go into that. So if you look at Islamic history, after the Rashidun Caliphate and the Umayyad Caliphate, there was a golden period of Islamic history in a dynasty called the Abbasid Caliphate. Right? There were two rulers of this caliphate called Harun al-Rashid, who is very famous, in what is called the Arabian Nights book, and Caliph al-Mamun. Right? Now, under these two caliphs, right, a renewed attempt was made to conquer territories in Bharat. Right? So the Arabs had conquered Sindh in 712 CE. Post that, at about, let's say, 800 to 810 CE, they made renewed attempts to conquer the different areas of Bharat, right? So they were met with opposition with a dynasty called the Pratiharas. Okay? The Pratiharas came essentially from, let's say, the origin is basically from the Abu region, as they call it, Rajasthan, Gujarat border. But later they captured Kannauj. So the Kannauj was the capital, and they formed an empire across North India, which included also parts of Saurashtra, right? So among the Pratihara rulers, there was a king called Nagabhatta. He's called in history as Nagabhatta II, right? So effectively, all these evidences point to a fight between these Abbasid caliphs, okay, Caliph Al-Mamun, Imam Ghassan bin Abdullah, who is considered the greatest ruler of Oman, and obviously Pratihara Nagabhatta. Right? So what does this actually, all these inscriptions and epigraphs shall present to you in a moment talk about? So they basically talk about that there was an attack from the province of Sindh by the Arabs to places in the interior of Bharat. In order to counteract it, the Pratiharas launched a naval expedition to cut what is called as supply lines. Now, the ports of Oman, UAE, the present UAE, and Basra were the main staging ports for men material to go to Sindh, right? So if you hit these ports and you cut them off, you cut the supply lines to basically coming into Sindh. So the Pratiharas actually hit these sea lanes of communication, right? And they were very successful in that. So to give some more details, I'll go to the actual sources. So firstly, we have something called the Gopadri Prashasti, the Gwalior inscription. Now, very interestingly, in the verse 22, right, it talks about the crossing of the Apara Samudra. Okay, so it gives an allegory. It says that just like Prabhu Sri Ram crossed the ocean, okay, to basically for the sake of dharma and to get back Mata Sita, and he fought Ravan, who was basically a representation of dharma. Similarly, we had Nagabhatta and his son, Tat Janme Ramanama, his son, he was born as Rama, he didn't necessarily grew up to be a young lad. He crossed this ocean and he fought cruel people who basically Ashwabala, who had great strength in their horses and who were against dharma. In this, Ramabhadra is very clearly called Dharma Rakshita. He is a fellow who defended dharma, right? So this is a very detailed shloka, and very interestingly it says the objective of the expedition was to get back Rajya Lakshmi. Just like Prabhu Sri Ram, he went to fight and I would say liberate Mata Sita. Nagabhatta and Ramabhadra went to get back their Rajya Lakshmi. Now, what is the concept of Rajya Lakshmi? In a kingdom, Rajya Lakshmi is sovereignty. Okay? So, if suppose somebody attacks you, suppose somebody destroys your temples, suppose somebody kind of, your sovereignty, your self-respect is attacked, right? Your sovereignty is attacked, your good fortune is attacked. So, it's not just a matter of defense. You have to, set that, I would say, you have to, put a deterrence for that. In fact, in the same inscription it says, Sama Dana Bheda Vihina, Ananya Sadhana, Adhina, Pratapa, Ananya Pratapa, Dinamukha. That is, when Sama, Dana and Bheda, they actually became Vihina. So he was bereft of the Sama, Dana, Bheda. Effectively, he had exhausted the option of diplomacy, putting, let's say, covert operations, or of, let's say, giving gifts. He had to only resort to Ananya Pratapa in order to restore the defense of his kingdom. So the question is, we have a very clear reference of Nagabhatta actually carrying out an expedition across the sea. So is there any corresponding reference in Arabic or Middle Eastern works? So we have a book, we have two works. We have one work called Tufat al-Ayan bi Sirat al-Oman, right? Now as per this, this work is actually a collection of different chronicles by Abdullah ibn Humayd in the 19th century, but he takes a lot of old chronicles of Oman and he compiles them together. In this, there are two references made. One is that Kufar of Al-Hind, who came in Barijas, who were called Bawarij, hampered the regions of Oman, plundering and taking prisoners towards Al-Iraq and Al-Fars, right? So basically, there was a kind of lot of raid which is happening in Iraq and Iran, okay? And these people came towards what is called as Zulfar and Dibba. Now, Zulfar is in present day United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Ras Al Khaimah, that is Zulfar. And Dibba is the Musandan Peninsula, which is in Oman, right? So these Kufra of Al-Hind, the Kafirs of Al-Hind, they came basically to this area, and Ibn Ghassan had to build a navy, and he built huge ships, right, to defeat these people. He could not defeat them, but he was able to protect the civilian population, right? This is what the Arabic source is. I'll come to what the truth is in a bit. So we have some reference of an Indian military attack around the time when Nagabhatta says he crossed the ocean, right? Now they use the word Bawarij, people say Bawarij is pirates, but we have to understand that Arabs generally use such terms for all Hindu kings. For example, Dahar of Sindh was also called a Bawarij or a pirate. So going next, at the same time we have one more text from Iraq. which said that a fleet of Al-Barija or of assault vessels from Al-Hind came and attacked Basra and Al-Fars, and 50 of Ibadi missionaries were actually killed in this process, right? Now, certain Arabic historians have interpreted this to mean that there was a lot of loot and there was killing. But we have to understand who these Ibadi missionaries were. Now, these were religious people, but not religious people like what we know, right? So they are not monks, they are not people who believe in ahimsa, etc. These were people who carried a sword. And they used to spread the religion. So all this means, if I can piece together a story together, what we have is that under the most powerful of the Islamic caliphs, attack was launched in Bharat from Sindh. The Pratiharas counterattacked the attack in land, but they also used the sea to attack the enemy's territory itself. In Basra, in Zulfar, in Bharat, in UAE, in Iran, in UAE, etc., to cut the supply lines of communication. They were pretty effective in that because we know for sure that eastern Sindh was liberated from the Muslim control and went into Pratihara control after that. In fact, we have Sulaiman, an Arab traveler, who says Sindhu passed through the Pratihara dominions. Right? So it was effective in liberating eastern Sindh. Western Sindh broke off from the Caliphate and became dissolved into two small kingdoms, out of which only two cities, Bansura and Multan, remained with the Islamic rulers. Right? So that was the effect of this expedition. Now, why is it the entire Sindh was not liberated? That's a question I'll come to later, basically. So effectively, we have one more evidence or example of a Hindu ruler going and actually attacking the most powerful Islamic Caliphate, which is basically Pratihara Nagabhatta. So just I'll quickly cover the Parmara conquest also. So in the Nagpur State Museum, right, you have an inscription, okay, which is a pretty lengthy inscription. It is dated 1161 Vikram Samvat, right? This is also called the Nagpur Museum Stone Inscription or the Nagpur Prashasti. Now this inscription talks about a king called Lakshmadeva, a Parmara king called Lakshmadeva, and his brother Naravarmadeva. Now we know the example of Prabhu Shri Ram and Bharat, right? When Prabhu Shri Ram went to Vanvas, Bharat ruled the kingdom with his slipper, Prabhu Shri Ram's, slippers actually on the throne. So this is a very interesting example in Kali Yuga where Lakshmadeva went to fight the invaders of Bharat, and his brother ruled in the name of Lakshmadev till the time he came back. So as per the inscription legend, and when Lakshmadev came back, he did not covet the kingdom, he gave up his kingdom. So Lakshmadev actually then made Naravarman the king, saying that, you have done selfless service, I want to continue fighting and continue doing the expeditions. But what does this verse 454 of this inscription tells us? This verse 54 tells us a very interesting thing. Now let's not forget this is coming after the period of Muhammad Ghazni. So Muhammad Ghazni has come, he has destroyed the Somnath temple, he has looted a lot of kingdoms, right? His descendants are there. Now this inscription tells us that Vangshu Kanthasthale, or on the banks of the Vangshu river, Sthala, a camp or a location. Okay, so the Vangshu river is a river which is for the Oxus river, a river which is in the boundaries of Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. There are a lot of people who try to interpret saying Vangshu is Sindhu. There is no text which says Sindhu and Vangshu are the same. Right? Vangshu has a very clear meaning and interpretation, which is the Oxus river. Right? So Vangshu Kanthasthale, so this king, he is positioned in the Vangshu Kanthasthale. What does he do in Vangshu Kanthasthale? You can say Khelod Khat Turushka Datta Vilasat Vaha Vali Vilain. So basically the Turushkas are there, the Turks are there, they have given Datta of the horses, their horses, as tribute after being defeated or after being wiped out. Very interestingly, it also talks about the Keshara. All the horses have Kesara or saffron on their bodies, which they are rolling and getting those saffron out, basically. And at that same time, there is a Kiradipati, there's another king who was caged like a parrot by this Turushkas, who was singing the praises of this Parmara king, right? So very interesting, unique inscription in verse 54, which talks about an Indian king in a camp somewhere in Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and who has defeated the Turks. And which Turk? Turushkas. We are talking about, and I'll come to that later on, who is the enemies. So why is this Vangshu Kanthasthale very important? In Uzbekistan, there is a place called Termez. Okay? So if you look at the map actually shows it. This Termez was the most important religious center for all Turkish sultanates, wherever they are. whether they be the Seljuk Turks in Turkey, in Iran, in Uzbekistan, in Kyrgyzstan, in Afghanistan. This was the most important religious center for them. So you can say just maybe not as much as Somnath was for the Hindus, but it's a very important religious center for the Turkish Muslims who are there, right? So there were 3 Islamic Turkish sultanates who had vowed to defend this Termez. One was the Yamini Turks, who is Muhammad of Ghazni and his descendants. Second was the Seljuk Turks, who ruled over a large part of what is called the Persian Empire in the west, right? Third was what is called the Tara Khanids, or guys who ruled over the Uzbekistan area, right? So this Termez is also a place where you can see you have a lot of saffron fields. It's a very area famous for saffron fields. So this area in Termez and the southern area in Balkh is where you have a lot of saffron fields, and is exactly where the geography of the Vangshu or Oxus River is in an area of plains where a camp can be actually set up. If you look at the way the river flows, basically. So what we are talking about exactly is that after Muhammad of Ghazni, okay, now his descendants ruled over part of Punjab. In 1035 and later 1043, the Hindu kings actually launched offensives and tried and captured, let's say, a lot of parts of eastern Punjab. But basically around the end of, let's say, the 11th century, Parmara Lakshmadeva launched a counter-offensive against these kingdoms and actually reached up to Vangshamandastale, which is in Termez, right? So this was a counter-offensive race. So he was in striking distance of the main religious center of these Turkish sultanates. Now the question is, while we have such an explicit Sanskrit inscription, is there any corresponding Muslim sources which kind of corroborate this? Now interestingly, at the same time, Ferishta in his work says that there is a discord in the reign of the contemporary Turkish ruler, that is Alauddin. When did Alauddin actually ascend the throne? And he says there's a difference of 1 decade in different scholars, right? If you go to another, let's say, Islamic source, they also say that there was a period of confusion of 15 years in the change of reign. So this is exactly the time when we also find the same inscription. So there is a lot of merit in the fact that there was actually a live military action which actually took place and went to the heart of Turkestan. Now there are a lot of criticisms to this. So people say that this could be an exaggeration or a copy of the Raghuvansa. So in my work, I actually compared the Raghuvansa and the Nagpur Prashasti. And to be honest, the Raghuvansa talks about Raghu's campaign against the Hunas. So Raghu goes to the northern area, which is the area of Kubera, and then he fights the Hunas, and it says that Hun camp, the women of the Hun camp used to practice a ritual called scarring. So the cheeks were red because they kind of scarred their cheeks. There is no similarity between the Raghuvansha and the content of this Nagpur Prashasti. As I've told you, the only similarity is the Vangshu river and the mention of Ashwa or horses. Now this can be there in any other place. For example, if I write a book on Bengaluru and you write a book on Bengaluru and the common word is Bengaluru, it doesn't effectively mean that I have copied your work. The second logical point is, if it was so easy to copy the Raghuvansa, why didn't any other Hindu king copy the Raghuvansa? Right? Because everybody was inspired by Raghu. Everybody was inspired by the Ikshvaku clan. So all this supports and suggests the fact that Parmara Lakshmadeva actually had this expedition and actually kind of went up to this place. Go next. Mauryas. So in which the Mauryas claim that the whole earth is under one umbrella. They have come, there's a worship and veneration of kings, different things basically. There's a Tang official called Chang Yue. Chang Yue talks about the different types of emperors. There are 4 continents as per the Chinese kind of mention. Panchu Kua is a continent which includes 4 areas. Land of men, which they call as China. Land of elephants, which is basically India. Then there's land of wealth and something else, right? But the important thing is land of men, China, they say is the best. That is, anyway, as per the Chinese rulers. But this Chang Yue says that there is one type of emperor called the Iron Wheel monarch who unites all these 4 territories together. There's land of men, land of, I would say, elephants, etc. Now, who are these emperors? Very interestingly, there are a lot of Mauryan people. There's a Gupta emperor. There are different kind of emperors from Bharat who are included in this list, basically, right? And then there are a lot of other details. For example, there's a detail of the Yuan period from Tanchang, which talks about Ashwamedha Yagna. People from Patliputra following a horse, going to a place called Dianchi in southwestern China and establishing a kingdom out there. There's one by Ai Zigyu, 17th century Ming Empire Dengchuan sub-prefecture, who has written a gazette of a Dengchuan sub-prefecture, who says that there was a rule of the Bharatiya kings here, and from Bharat, and they introduced rice, spiced rice, and that is why the aborigines of the place became called as Bai Feng Weng, the people of the white rice. So that's just too many details. I have paucity of time not to explain. But the most interesting king out of these iron wheel monarchs is what I want to have at least 2 minutes. Is another unknown Indian or a Hindu king called Gahadvala Govindachandra, right? Now, I don't think anybody would have heard of this king. How many people have heard of Govindachandra? Nobody. Trust me, there are 41 inscriptions of this king. This king's coins are found in Rawalpindi, northwest frontier Pakistan. They are found in Afghanistan. In fact, so popular were his coins that 100 years after his death, Muhammad Ghori, who was one of the plunderers and invaders of Bharat, he restruck their coins. And what is the joke is, one very famous liberal secular historian, I think actually said that, see, Muhammad Ghori is so secular. He has kind of put Sri Lakshmi coins. But the reality is, the Gahadvala Govindachandra's coins were so famous, people were not willing to accept Muhammad Ghori's coins and he had to restruck them, but he couldn't delete Sri Lakshmi's image from that coin. So that's a different story. But this Gahadvala Govindachandra is also very important for us today. In the Ram Janmabhoomi case, there were a lot of evidences present in the court on there was a temple before the mosque. One of the inscriptions which proved there was a temple was that of this Gahadvala Govindachandra, right? But why is Gahadvala Govindachandra important to me? He's a man who has a lot of, I would say, interests or a lot of significance. But he is important because of a verse in Prakrit Paingalam. Prakrit Paingalam is a metric verse in Prakrit. It tells us that there was this king of Kashi, okay, who did Vyuha Rachana. Okay, he did Vyuha Rachana, Vyuhas, there are different Vyuhas in the Mahabharata, right? You have a Vyuha of a tortoise, you have a Chakra Vyuha, the famous Chakra Vyuha, etc. So this king was obsessed with Vyuha Rachana, and what he did is, he went and in this Vyuha Rachana, he kind of captured Nepal, then Bhota Raja Pitata Chale, this in Prakrit. So the Bhota Raja actually self-inflicted wounds. The Bhota, king of Tibet, self-inflicted wounds because he was defeated. And importantly, Bhujanja Vishya, China Darpahina Raja, Lohavala Hakanda Pale. So Nepal, Bhota, then China Raja. China Raja, Darpahina, his arrogance was out. He was out of the arrogance. And there was a huge amount of commotion when this king was defeated in battle. Right? Now, this is a very unique work. Now, first and foremost, it's not a prashasti. This is a Prakrit teaching text. So, imagine in a Gurukul, somebody would be teaching you the metrics and would be saying, this is an example. For example, we are teaching you. So, the very fact that this comes in such a text means that there's some credence to it that somebody is talking about. Now, how is it that Gahadvala Govindachandra got associated with China? Now, there's a theory to this, which I'll quickly conclude before I kind of conclude my session. Gahadvala Govindachandra had an alliance with Kulatunga Chola. How do we know this? We have an inscription in Tanjavur where a sister of Gahadvala Govindachandra is married to a Chola prince, right? So Govindachandra is from Kannauj. He's a Rajput ruler from Kannauj. His sister marries a Chola prince and she gives an inscription in the Brihadeshwara temple of Tanjavur. So we established that this person was an ally of the Cholas. In Govindachandra's inscriptions, he fights all the enemies of the Cholas. So Eastern Gangas, the Western Chalukyas, etc. Right? We know that Kulatunga Chola also had an active participation in Southeast Asia. In fact, at that point of time, the Chinese court was divided into two factions. And one faction actually restricted the Ainu River, where the Chola merchants are trading out there. Right? So the theory which I have is possibly, since Gahadvala Govindachandra was such a close ally of Kulatunga Chola, and the Cholas basically, it is probable that he participated in one of these expeditions against this particular faction of the Song Empire of Emperor Gaozan. And we know that Emperor Gaozan was actually defeated at least thrice and he had to flee his capital twice. So there are a lot of such, I would say, elements which are there. But a very interesting emperor who is an iron wheel monarch is basically Gahadvala Govindachandra. If I conclude, what do these narratives really tell us? Or what is the fundamental questions we have, right? The first question if people ask me is, if Hindu kings were so powerful that we could go to Baghdad, we could go to China, why were we not able to defend ourselves? Right? Because Babur came, he kind of looted our temples, he kind of destroyed our, I would say, I think, etc. Right? So I know this again is a theory, but my answer for this is that the Hindu kings, if you look at the Parmaras or the Pratiharas or everywhere, they did not finish the job. If I may just put it very crudely as such. So there was always a concept of Dharma Vijaya, right? In always you had Dharma Vijaya, Lobha Vijaya, and Asura Vijaya. Dharma Vijaya is somebody who forgives the person who asks for forgiveness, right? So for some reason they thought that the whole world was a Dharma. So somebody was telling in the morning session that we should be happy with the way our own Dharmic history. That's very good. The problem is there are a lot of people in the world who don't want you to be happy. They will cause a bomb blast. They will cause a Pahalgam terror. So you need to have a Shastra Dharma to protect yourself so that others are happy, so you can fight with them. Right? So the concept of Dharma Vijaya had to be interpreted. Secondly, why is remembering our military conquest abroad so important? People say, what is the use of all this? Yeah, it means, kya ukhad loge yaar? Theek hai, we went to Arabia, we went to Islam. We have to understand that this subconsciously interprets our understanding today. To give you an example, our defense budgets. I was speaking to somebody from the Navy when I was because they supported me a lot in this book. So they told me that when you go to actually ask, and this used to be a bureaucratic example, right? When you go to somebody to ask that I want this particular equipment, the first question they'll ask is, it costs so much of money. Why do you want this? Is it for defense? Is it for offense? Now a military guy knows what is for defense and what is for offense. And I think as Sir has rightly said, you have to be sometimes an offense for your own defense, right? So subconsciously we have this mentality that we are a very peaceful country. It's very good to be peaceful. It's not good to look at attacking others. We should not get into this mentality. Fortunately, that has been changing now slowly and steadily. But even then, I mean, we have to understand that this is a continuous process, right? It is not something which is just a one-off incident, right? Secondly, I want to come to a last point before I conclude. Has academic prejudice against Hindu rulers been addressed at present? Now, a lot of people tell me that the history of India is North-centric, Delhi-centric, it's against South, etc., right? So I myself a Tamilian. I don't believe that history of India as it's taught is anti-South or is North-centric or Delhi-centric. I believe it is anti-Hindu-centric, right? Think about this, Gahadvala Govindachandra, right? Nobody knows about him. He's from Kannauj. Parmara Lakshmadeva. And why? That is because subconsciously we think that Hindu kings are small regional kings, right? We often make the statement that culturally we are always united, politically we are never united. It's a very stupid statement to make. Itihasa shows from the beginning that Ekarat Samrajya Chakravartiship was the ideal. Raghu, Sagara, Prabhu Shri Ram had to do an Ashwamedha Yagna. Yudhishthira had to do Rajasuya and Ashwamedha Yagna, right? So there was always an aspiration that you have to have political unity. The form of that may differ. It may not be centralized, it may be decentralized. But there was always a concept of political unity which was there. So I feel that this subconscious academic prejudice which is there, which is partitions Hindu rulers as small regional rulers, that is something which also these narratives seemingly question. So that's about it. I'm sorry for taking a lot of time. Thank you.